USC needs defense for 2024. They can only work on 2025 right now in terms of player acquisition, and they are doing just that. Appreciate you stopping by here at Trojan Conquest Live right here at the Voice of College Football with the two that make it happen. Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire, Tim Prangley, Trojans Wire, and of course, their contributions here at the Voice of College Football with shows on Monday and on Friday. So join that call-in show. That is your show, as Tim likes to remind you on a regular basis. Join these guys Friday at 7 Pacific time. Guys, how we doing tonight?
Doing really good, Mark. Thanks for joining us again. Monday nights are the fun show, apparently, because we've had some really good showings in the chat. Guys, make sure you guys are active in that chat for us. Let us know. We will be answering your questions if you give us some good questions to answer.
We have Matt Moscona standing by from ESPN Radio to break down LSU and USC and that week one affair. And this should be a tremendous conversation, but we will go to the matters at hand. And Tim, you want defensive linemen. You want them badly, about as bad as anything except offensive linemen, I think. And you got a pretty good one coming in committed this week.
Yeah, Hayden Lowe is one of the better pass rushers, one of the top edge rushers you're going to find in the country. He's got a great first step, really athletic, really good bend, just an athlete. And big thing for you Trojan fans that want to hear, he's from California. A lot of the guys we've been getting have been out of state. This is one of the top players in California, not only in the country, but in California as well. And it gives USC yet another really talented, athletic, strong 6 foot. That you see him from 6'4", 6'5", 240 range, 255 range. So the guy plays the part. He's built like a guy on the edge that's going to be able to be successful in this defense. Someone that Sean Nua can really mold. Going to come down to a very deep room as well. So USC is stacking up on the outside, still waiting on the commitments on the inside to add. I believe we will be adding a couple more on the inside.
What's notable, a number of things are, but what stood out to me reading what Hayden Lowe said about his journey to USC, committing to the Trojans, he said, it's Coach Henny, woof, woof. The dog work paying off. Like he said, Coach Henderson certainly made a difference in this recruitment. And the other thing that jumps off the page about what Hayden Lowe said about USC, he said, they have grit. They're different now. He really addressed that head on, that this is not the same program. This is not Alex Grinch, Dante Williams, tissue soft, get out of here, weak sauce. This is, there's some real elbow grease here. There's some blue collar muscle here. There's a commitment to being physical here. So like Hayden Lowe is buying what USC's selling. And so it's a real connection. And I think, if we're to try and draw some broader conclusions from all of this, gentlemen, and for everyone watching here at the Voice of College Football, I just think that with transfer portal prospects, they want to go somewhere, not just where they can be developed, but also where, like, if they're going to transfer somewhere for their senior season, they want to see if they can win a national championship, get to the playoff, at least like compete in a quarterfinal, semifinal. And with new incoming recruits getting in the door, I think there's more of a sense of, hey, I want Coach Henny to develop me the whole way at USC, or at least I certainly want Coach Henny to develop me on the ground floor starting up. I think there's a clear difference between transfer portal and recruits. And I see that we have our guest here now.
Absolutely. So, folks, we will talk plenty of recruiting, obviously, later in the hour, but we want to bring in our guest. Got Matt Moscona joining us from ESPN Radio, Baton Rouge, and New Orleans. And for some reason, when I've never had this issue before. Tim, do you know what's going on here? We just brought in Matt. It wasn't working, but Tim had the magic touch. Matt, how's it going?
Hey, guys. Going great. Good to be on with you. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. So we have Matt on as much as we can possibly get him at the Voice of College Football. We always appreciate Matt. He's got a ton going on covering LSU athletics, does a remarkable job. The show is After Further Review. It's on ESPN Radio and you can catch it on. Well, we will run down those particulars Monday through Friday at 3 to 6 Central Time. But I got to think for those people that can't catch it live, Matt, when's the best time to join you in the best way too?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. For as long as you've been kind enough to invite me, I've always said, if you could spell my name, you can find me online, man. So YouTube, any social platform, my handle is always at Matt Moscona. So we're everywhere. So you spell my name correctly, you'll find me.
Well, Matt, I know among other things, because of the many conversations we've had, that you love college football, and therefore you love matchups like this. So we'll get it revved up. That's why we've got you here. One aspect of this that is very interesting to see as we lead off the conversation is that Miller Moss is replacing a legend. Guy won a Heisman Trophy. Oh, Garrett Nussmeier's in that same situation, replacing Jaden Daniels at LSU. So basically, the burden or the opportunity, however you want to phrase it, with Garrett Nussmeier trying to replace Superman, and how you think he's taking that on right now.
Yeah, the parallels between these two teams are pretty incredible. Replacing Heisman Trophy winners, new defensive coordinators. I mean, it really is pretty remarkable how similar that this fell with the two teams opening up. Garrett Nussmeier is kind of an oddity in college football today, because guys that are that highly touted don't sit and wait until their fourth year to play. And it's interesting because you have Carson Beck at Georgia who waited, and you have Garrett Nussmeier at LSU who waited his turn. The bugaboo with Garrett throughout the young part of his career was the arm talent's there. He's the son of a coach. He's got all the intangibles, great team guy, everything. He was just careless with the football. If anyone has the time or the tolerance, you can go back and watch an LSU game against Southern a couple of years ago in Tiger Stadium, where Garrett got in late and he threw one of the most heinous pick sixes you'll ever see in your life. So the real interesting thing was going to be if Garrett can kind of grow out of that and protect the football. And I understand spring is spring and it's a small sample size. And then he did start the bowl game. And again, small sample size. But I think you really saw the growth and progression. If Garrett can protect the football and get his playmakers involved, this offense, it's not going to be what it was a year ago. I mean, guys, they led the country in scoring and total offense. Again, they would literally have to be the best offense in college football. So I don't think they're going to be that, but they're going to be plenty good enough to win any game they play if Garrett protects the football.
And I didn't make that parallel to the extent that I could have, because, we got two of these quarterbacks and I outlined those similarities. But yes, they both had outstanding bowl game performances in lighting up pretty good defenses as well. So I'll turn it over to Tim and Matt because they have much to ask you about, Matt.
So, Matt, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. We talked about the new defensive coordinators, and we talked about prolific offenses, right? So that's something that they've got down. Had some issues. Both sides had issues on defense last year. USC has brought in Danton Lynn. You guys have Blake Baker coming off that really good run with Missouri. What have you seen? What's right away? We got some shocks with Danton Lynn. We got a lot. What's giving you the most confidence with Baker coming onto the scene?
Well, maybe there's not a large sample size, right? So Blake was at LSU for a season before Brian Kelly was hired. When Brian Kelly was hired, he didn't retain Blake Baker. And now 2 years later, he's hired him back as his defensive coordinator. But I think internally they would tell you that Blake needed that experience at Missouri to go be a defensive coordinator in the SEC. And I mean, you talk about parallels, guys, it's interesting because the defense he inherited at Missouri was triple digits in total defense. They were in the 118, 116, all the major categories. And in year one, he brought him into the top 40. So I think the hope here from an optimist standpoint is that there's a similar turnaround. I think Blake is really relatable. He's a young guy. He's an oddity in coaching in that he actually wears cleats to practice and he'll get in the drills and run around. I don't know that he's got the horses that LSU is used to having. It's going to take some time to get that back. But guys, no matter what, there's just no excuse for an LSU defense to ever be as bad as they were a year ago. They were statistically, guys, literally the worst defense in LSU history. And there was enough talent. I mean, you had 3 defensive linemen drafted off that team. You had talent And I'm not saying you should have been a top 10, top 20, top 30 defense, but to be 106th in total defense, 118th in pass or whatever it was, that's unacceptable. So long way of answering your question, for Blake Baker, it really is just be competent and maximize the talent you have and be good enough to complement a really good offense. I don't think this defense needs to be a top 20 defense for LSU to have a chance to be a playoff team. They just need to not be the worst defense in program history. And I think that's the expectation for Blake in year one.
I think the parallels are eerily similar between the two programs on that as well.
You know, we saw D'Anton Lynn as well. I mean, look, when he was the DC there at UCLA when LSU opened up in the Rose Bowl in 2021. So it's odd for two teams, you know, in different conferences, different parts of the country to have this many similarities and crossovers. But I mean, it is kind of like that Spider-Man vibe where like they're looking at each other and pointing. Like that's kind of what LSU and USC are going into this game.
So, Matt, Mark made reference to the quarterbacks. And, of course, you know, Garrett Nussmeier can't be like Jaden Daniels. You know, he has to be himself. Miller Moss, he's not going to be like Caleb Williams. He has to be himself. And there's an obvious thought process, philosophy that because these guys aren't super duper stars, they're not proven quarterbacks the way their predecessors were and are, that the way to approach this week one game is ball control, short passes, keep it simple, high percentage, put them in positions to succeed and not overextend them, not overload them. Don't expect them to be the hero. But on the other hand, both of these teams had secondaries, which were Swiss cheese last year. And so there's a thought process that the matchups to hunt when these teams have the ball, it's throwing vertically. So how do you think Brian Kelly and his staff are going to balance safety and percentage plays versus aggression and vertical shots with Garrett Nussmeier?
Yeah, well, if you look at LSU's roster, the single biggest strength, and this is not even debatable in any conversation, is the offensive line. They returned 4 starters. The tackles, look at any mock draft, and you will see Will Campbell, LSU's left tackle, as a top 10 pick, and you'll see Emory Jones, the right tackle, as a first-round pick, somewhere probably in the 20s or teens. Your 2 starting guards, Garrett Dellinger is going to be a 4-year starter, and Miles Frazier, who transferred in a couple of years ago from FIU, who was a freshman All-American at Florida International. He's now started for 3 years at LSU. They are experienced and talented and all that stuff. So if you're not putting yourself in position to succeed behind that offensive line, that's just silly. Now, so I do expect that they will try to run the ball and play around the line of scrimmage and play to the strengths of that line. Now, LSU's got a bunch of game breakers on the outside, which we can talk about. The other interesting thing, guys, is, and this is one difference with SC and LSU, obviously, the SC is still Lincoln Riley's offense. I mean, the conductor of the train is still there. LSU is replacing Mike Denbrock. So Mike Denbrock was the OC who was a Broyles finalist and is a super experienced play caller that Brian Kelly hired when he got the LSU job. They'd worked together at Notre Dame, but Denbrock was the OC of that Cincinnati team, if you remember, with Desmond Ritter that played Georgia in that Peach Bowl. And Denbrock was awesome. Well, Denbrock's gone back to Notre Dame now. And so Joe Sloan, who was the quarterback's coach, has been promoted to OC. So there is a little bit of an unknown there as far as what this offense is going to look like with Joe Sloan. Now, he did call plays in the bowl game, but, you know, I think that is an unknown, and that could be a benefit for LSU, that there'll be a little bit of an element of you're not sure how Sloan will conduct a game. But there's also the flip side of that, which is when you haven't called 100, 200 games, you know, there probably is that experience and growth factor throughout that as well.
Tim.
I'm sorry, I'm pulling up the chat. Matt, go ahead. I'm sorry, I've got two things going on once.
All right. So, Matt, you know, here at USC, one of the things we've certainly been struggling with in the offseason has been landing defensive tackles in the portal. And I know LSU had some similar struggles. So, like, you know, at USC, our conversation is...
Dude, we are the spider. We're just pointing at each other. We're looking the same in the mirror.
That's right. That's right. So what are people saying at LSU about the notion of, you know, we shouldn't overpay or we need to overpay? Like, you know, if you have a position of need or an acute weakness? Like, you need to do more, go harder for those transfer portal prospects? Like, how is the LSU community handling the same debate that we're having here at USC pretty much every week at the Voice of College Football?
Well, I think there's got to be a degree of realism. So I know Brian Kelly's comments a couple of weeks ago, caught fire when he said, we're not in the business of buying players. The disappointing thing about that, the reaction to that, I should say, is that Brian Kelly, you guys know this, when you're an interviewer, what you would really love are thoughtful answers with context and candor. And Brian Kelly had about a 3.5 minute back and forth about that whole topic, but all anybody latched onto was that one phrase. I mean, guys, LSU has the number one player in the country for 2025 committed. He's a quarterback, Bryce Underwood, out of Michigan. Listen, Gumbo and Etouffee are awesome, and I think Southern women are beautiful, but Bryce Underwood didn't commit to LSU because of Gumbo and Southern women, okay? Like, LSU has a lot to offer. They've had 2 Heisman Trophy winners since 2019, and there's a lot to offer. But you're naive if you don't think NIL is part of that. So, of course, LSU is involved in NIL. They're certainly not as wealthy as some other places are, with the coffers that like an Ohio State or Ole Miss has even shown of late. But the way Brian Kelly is going about building this roster, we'll see if it works. But since the day he showed up on campus, his approach has been, we're going to build and develop through the high school ranks, and we'll supplement in the transfer portal. And so they're not just going to go. I'll give you just a very descriptive answer. So the player that he was talking about, a defensive lineman, was Dominic Williams from TCU. And Dominic Williams, had they landed him, would have been immediately the most experienced and veteran defensive tackle that they would have had. But Dominic Williams had a 7-figure ask of the LSU collective. That would have been more than double the highest paid player on LSU's team right now. And I just told you they got Will Campbell on the team, who's a projected top 10 pick and has started every game at left tackle since he was game 1 of true freshman season. That's what Brian Kelly was alluding to. And I don't know if that strategy is going to work. Guys, maybe the Ole Miss strategy of, hey, we're going to lose 25 guys, sign 24, and go spend $15, $17 million. Maybe that's the strategy that's going to work in the NIL era, especially in a 12-team playoff. That's another variable we don't know. So I think on one hand, LSU fans are a little apprehensive because it's very obvious there are programs that have more money and are spending more money. But the other part of it, too, is I think you can respect what Brian Kelly is trying to build. It's just a matter of, will it work this way? And, this is year 3, and he's had back-to-back 10-win seasons. And it'll be a pretty interesting telltale if they're able to take that next stair step and, get to 10, 11 wins in the regular season and get into a 12-team playoff. But I think that's the natural progression everybody's looking for. But what he inherited was a mess, guys, and he has turned the program around rapidly and put them in position to compete. So while yes, there's some trepidation, I think there's also the flip side of it, which is excitement over what he's built and some buy-in because the results have been there.
So we've heard a little about the offensive line, but if LSU is going to beat USC offensively, where do you think that they'll have the best matchup? Where do you think that LSU has the advantage?
Well, candidly, I can't say I know the USC roster as well as you guys do. But I will tell you, outside of LSU's offensive line, the position group that this will probably surprise people, but they've got a bunch of freak shows at receiver again. And y'all remember a decade ago, like LSU was a quarterback graveyard. Like they literally didn't even throw the ball. It was just this constant point of frustration to see guys that LSU would pump into the NFL at receiver that they just didn't utilize under Les Miles. But if it was Odell and Jarvis to, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and now Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors, like LSU has just had this pipeline of dudes they've pumped into the league, and they've got the next crop of them ready to roll. I mean, I don't need to rattle off a bunch of names, but just know Kyron Lacey. He wears number 2. He thought about going to the draft last year. He'll come back, and he's a dude that's every bit a number 1 first-round pick talent. He was just overshadowed by 2 dudes that, went in the first round last year. But Kyron Lacey's a guy that I would be really surprised if SC fans didn't get to know a lot on September 1.
Matt, for as loaded as that wide receiver room is, we are accustomed to the LSU running back room being just as loaded. And it's been about 3 or 4 years since they've had the kind of dudes that we're used to seeing. And it really doesn't appear, please correct me if I'm wrong, as though they're going to have that kind of back this year.
So they're very thin. It was so interesting. Last year in fall camp, they had 8 scholarship running backs. And so Brian Kelly kept getting peppered with this question, like, what are you going to do with 8 running backs? And his response was always, well, eventually, it sorts itself out. And it did. But of those 8, 4 now are gone because John Emery decided to return. I don't know if y'all noticed, but if y'all saw that he had it looked like he was going to commit to UCLA as a transfer. And just over the weekend announced he's coming back to LSU. Well, the name that everyone here is very excited about is Caleb Jackson. So he's a kid from Baton Rouge. He was a high 4-star. And if you go look up a highlight, guys, there was a play against Mississippi State last year where he just dump trucked a kid on the sideline. And it was one of those viral clips. He looks kind of like the back you're describing. He looks like Fournette or Jeremy Hill or one of those guys that's the big 230-pound guy that has great foot speed but can also run you over. He looks the part. I think a lot of people here are very excited to see him get 200 carries this year to see what that looks like. Josh Williams is back for a 6th season. Josh probably isn't an NFL running back, guys. He's just a really good college football player. Started his career as a walk-on and has just become a very valued piece. I mean, he does everything. He can pass protect. He can run. He can catch the ball. Like he's not going to be on anybody's all-American, all-conference list, but he's just a really, really good college football player. And then they got a freshman coming in, Caden Durham, who's a blue chip from Duncanville, Texas, and people are really excited about him, but he'll probably have to wait his turn, especially if Caleb Jackson has the type of season most expect. But Mark, you're right. I mean, they're thin, and there's not a lot of big time experience in that running back room. There's some talent for sure, but experience, skins on the wall, that's what they lack for certain this year.
All right, Matt, another parallel USC and LSU conversations, very similar this offseason. One of the conversations at USC on the defensive side of the ball, what has to be fixed first? Obviously, everything needs to be fixed because the defense was just so horrible last year at both places. So at USC, we've been having the conversation. How much of it is scheme? How much of it is culture? How much of it is not having the dudes? So I just present that to you. How much of fixing this mess is scheme? How much of it is culture? How much of it is having better dudes?
Well, I don't think it's culture because I think they've built a good culture and you have buy-in. I think last year you had this awful confluence of circumstance where you definitely did not, like, it's so odd to say this at a place like LSU, which kind of became known as DBU, kind of in that conversation with Florida and Ohio State, whatever. I mean, I don't really care. I'm not trying to have that argument, but you know the list of names that they've pumped into the NFL at that position. And guys, there wasn't a single draftable player in LSU secondary. So you got to have an increase in talent. Now they hit the portal and they got some freshmen coming in, and we'll see how much that closes that gap, from a year ago. But another big part of it too was the scheme, where I don't think Matt House, who was the defensive coordinator a year ago, who's a smart guy and has had success, I just don't think he related to his players and communicated his defensive concepts well enough, and they certainly didn't adjust. So, yes, the dudes is part of it. But even with the players LSU had, that's still no excuse to be as bad as they were. And guys, it wasn't just like it was SEC games. I mean, we saw Grambling out of the SWAC in week 2 toasting LSU. There's no excuse ever for it. So that's where you can say, look, I don't care how good the kid from Grambling is. He's not better than the kid in purple and gold. And when you're getting beat by 15 yards, you're not where you're supposed to be. Like you don't have to know X's and O's and being able to diagram defense to go, that ain't right. So that's where I think the hope is Blake Baker coming in can close that gap a little bit.
Spider-Man meme just continues, doesn't it, Matt? It's just amazing. Everything you're saying, I'm just like, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
Episode.
Yeah. So Brian Kelly going to LSU. Talk about your odd couple situation. I know it's been a couple years now for you guys to digest it. How is he doing down there? And again, the issue with the defense. How long? Let's assuming worst case scenario, if they don't get the defense sorted out. How long of a leash does he have down there?
He's got like a $70 million leash. He ain't going nowhere, man. For better or worse, LSU and Brian Kelly are financially woven together for the duration of his contract. They gave him a 10-year deal, where he is owed 90% of the remaining amount of his contract if they fire him. So I think after this year, if they were to fire him, it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $68 million. And that's just never going to happen here, ever. So they are pot committed, and Kelly is here for the duration. So there, that sort of answers that question. As far as how he's assimilated, guys, I know that Louisiana, and in particular the southern part of this state, is so culturally different from everywhere else, even in the South, right? I mean, there's the Cajun and Creole culture here. We spell things funny and we eat things that look funny, and I get it. But more than anything, people here want two things. They want you to embrace the culture, and they want you to win. And I've pointed this out for as long as people have asked me this question. As you can imagine, I get that a lot. The winningest coach in the history of LSU athletics is Skip Bertman, the baseball coach who won 5 national titles here. Skip Bertman is a Jewish guy who was born in Detroit and grew up in Miami. Like, Louisiana is very heavily Catholic. Dale Brown was the winningest basketball coach, and when he retired, he was second only to Adolph Rupp in the history of the SEC. Dale Brown was from Minot, North Dakota. The winningest football coach, most successful football coach here was Nick Saban, who was a Midwesterner, was from West Virginia, and spent most of his career in the Midwest. It don't matter if you know how to spell Chifuncta or andouille or you like gumbo. You just got to embrace the culture here, and you have to win. And if you do that, the people here will love you forever. They will embrace you. Like, if it's a weird thing here where we know we're different, but we love that we're different. Not for the sake of being different, because it's the culture that we all grew up in. And if you embrace it, man, we'll wrap our arms around you and love you forever. That's why people like Drew Brees, who have come here, stay when they could go anywhere in the world, because it becomes part of you if you let it. And I think Brian Kelly and his family have done a great job of that, man. And most importantly, he's won games. He's won games too. So yeah, I think Brian Kelly's done fine.
So I'm going to ask you a question, Matt, off of what you just said, that I don't think anyone would anticipate me asking this question, but why were you able to cut through all that and maintain that broadcasting diction and non-dialect?
Mark, you and I have known each other long enough, man. I don't really have an accent, do I? I mean, yeah, if you go about 40 miles south of where I am, you'd have a lot of people that talk like Coach O, for example. But yeah, I mean, y'all love Coach O, but nah, man. I grew up in it, man. It's. I look at it and go, man, how do you not know how to spell etouffee and andouille and chifuncta and chapatulas?
It's been a while since SC's played LSU. They're both the home and away way back when I was like a little kid. But there was that thing that happened in 2003.
Yeah.
And so we can't really invent a rivalry because there's not much of one, right? The two teams haven't played each other,
right.
But both sides, you say 2003, and right away, both sides just get up for that situation. What is the fever like down there? Has it been talked about at all recently, or is it maybe just in my mind that there's going to be some, not amongst the players because they have no idea what happened in 2003, but amongst the fan base, and the media, is it something that's brewing? Is it a conversation that you've heard at all?
I think as we get closer, we'll start to hear it. And guys, look, so I was that was my senior year at LSU. So I love that 03 LSU team. And, senior at LSU, Matty Moe over here was fully invested in that conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There were a lot of pickup trucks around Baton Rouge with FUSC bumper stickers for a long time here. There's probably still some rolling around. But I think time passes and that stuff sort of moves on. The point that I've always made is, and the system is what it is. It was the BCS. LSU won the BCS championship. But if the shoe were on the other foot and LSU didn't get an opportunity to play in the game and had won the AP title, you better believe LSU fans would claim the AP title as well. And it just speaks to what the system was and all the imperfections in it and how we've moved more toward a better system. I still don't think it's perfect, but 4 was better than 2, and I think 12 is better than 4. And I don't know that we're done expanding it either. But I think we will absolutely get a lot of those retrospectives as we get closer to the game. And I think it'll be really fun to look back at both of those teams, which I know both fan bases hold very dear, to their hearts. Because for LSU guys, that was the first title in 45 years. And for a lot of fans, they came and went without ever seeing it. And for people like me who grew up watching LSU struggle, you thought that was like forbidden fruit. It was something that could never happen. So, for that team to win it, I've been fortunate enough to be at all the LSU national championship, except for 1958. I wasn't alive. But that was a really special one to be at. And I don't know, man. I still remember the White House when both SC and LSU went. And then President Bush said, why we got a big lawn right here? Why don't we get some pads and play it out here? It was a pretty good moment. So more than anything, I think I look forward to any opportunity to look back at that 2003 team because they were pretty awesome.
I think we can all agree, whether you root for USC or LSU, or most notably, probably college football fans that are unbiased that didn't root for either one, but wanted to see that game played, that we can all agree that would have been the game to watch. Of course, the Oklahoma LSU game, if you just pick up a box score or don't look at the box score, just look at the final score, it looked like a close game, but it was not a close game.
Man, that LSU defense was something, man. Golly, when Marcus Spears had the pick 6 to start the second half and LSU went up 14, I pulled a cigar out of my pocket and was like waving it around because I just knew that defense wasn't blowing a 14-point lead. It was a different day, different era of college football, obviously, but that defense wasn't giving up a 14-point lead to anybody. That was obviously Nick Saban, his first title, and boy, there was NFL talent all over that field. They were fun to watch. I wish that defense played at LSU a year ago. They'd have another national title.
I wouldn't mind a 2000 defense at USC right now as well. So I hear you. Believe me.
Absolutely.
Matt,
so, Matt, go ahead. Well, I was just going to ask about the expectations of this team. Is it one of those deals, man? We just keep going back.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You go, no, I go.
You need a buzzer. I need a buzzer.
So expectations, is it simply meet the 12-team playoff, get there, and that's a successful season regardless of what happens at the playoff? Miss the 12-team playoff, bad season.
Yeah, if they miss, I think, tell me if you guys disagree with this, because I'm curious how the conversation goes across different leagues, and y'all are looking at it through a different prism now, obviously with the Big Ten. But the consensus here is the SEC is gonna get 2 for sure, and probably 3 in most every year. In a really, really odd, one-off, strange scenario, you might get 4. And you can go look at final rankings throughout the past, decade, 2 decades, and see that pretty much pans out. I don't know what that might look like in the Big Ten, and especially now with an expanded Big Ten. But I think the general feeling here is you got to be 10-2. If you're 10-2, you're going to get in the SEC. You're going to get in a 12-team playoff. Here's the odd thing. Everyone sort of roundly agrees Georgia and Texas are going to be in. Like, their schedules shape out, their rosters are great. Those 2 teams, if they're not there, something went terribly, terribly wrong. So really what you have then is this clump of LSU, Bama, Ole Miss, Missouri, Tennessee, these 5 teams that are probably all vying for 1 spot. And so I think that group of 5 teams, one fan base is going to be really happy, and the other 4 are really not. So if you're LSU, you can look at it and say, well, you get Ole Miss and Bama at home, and Vanderbilt rotates on the schedule, so that's always a plus. So maybe for LSU, it's that year where they're the team that goes 10-2 and makes it in the playoff. And if that's the case, then I think people will look and say, all right, that's another step of progress under Brian Kelly. Another 9-3 season is going to probably feel like you're just like, are you bumping up against the glass ceiling? How do you break through? And that sort of perpetual state of mediocrity is a terrible place to be, because you're close enough that you feel like you can taste it, but you're far enough away to where is it actually a reality? So, that's when you kind of start to have to make real decisions about culture and direction of the program, et cetera. So, Mark, I don't know if I really answered your question, man, but I think 10-2, if they don't get to 10-2 this year, I mean, that means you probably lost to Bama, you probably lost to Ole Miss, and then you dropped another one somewhere else that you probably weren't expecting to drop. And I think people would be real disappointed if that happened.
I have not seen the magazine, but apparently Lindy's is predicting 5 SEC teams in the playoffs.
I think that's crazy. That's just math, guys. I don't know how, and look, I'll be at SEC Media Days in a few weeks, and I'll see Lindy there, and I'll see Lynn Scarborough, who are good friends of mine. I can't imagine how does the math work that 5 SEC teams, 5 teams from any league would get into a playoff?
The only way I can think of it is because I've seen it in the Pac-12, is if the Big Ten beat the crap out of itself. Meaning, and there's got to be some and there's got to be, actually on top of that, you have to have some out of conference losses. But I don't know if you can get the only problem is if the Big Ten only got 1 team in, because the top teams all beat up on each other.
If it can, but guys, that's the kind of thing where I'm saying I think if a league cannibalizes itself, that might open the door in a weird one-off to get 4. And guys, just think of it like Bama and Tennessee play each other. Bama and Ole Miss play each other. LSU and Ole Miss play each other. LSU and Bama play each other. A lot of those teams we're talking about that are in that group of 5, they're all going to play each other. So I think what's going to happen is you'll have your top 2, which I think we're all expecting to be Georgia, Texas. And then the process of elimination is going to come based on the head-to-head matchups in that group that we talked about. I mean, I'm confident saying the SEC will get 3. Man, beyond that, it just really feels like it's going to take a weird scenario to unfold to get 4. 5 feels like, I would have to see the math, how that all plays out. I don't know how you'd get to 5 from one league.
Well, Matt,
this is what I was going to ask about, and it really flows into the conversation that we're having right now. And that is that, if you lose 2 games, you get in. And so I think part of that forecast is that Lindy's thinks that there are going to be a lot of 10-2 teams. So they're going to bump each other, but only twice. There's going to be that even distribution, right? It's like how you get NCAA tournament bids. You balance the wins and losses in your conference just enough to spread the wealth around. My question is, the SEC is still at 8 league games this year, and that might also be a factor. The SEC is playing 8, the Big Ten is playing 9. So that could also be a reason. And I want to get your thoughts on that. The SEC held out for another year with 8. What is the view among the LSU community, but also in the wider SEC community, in terms of playing 8 versus 9? Because when Texas and Oklahoma, it was announced that they would join the SEC, I thought, slam dunk, they're going to 9. It's going to happen right away. It didn't. So how are people viewing the 8 versus 9 conversation in the SEC?
Yeah, I've had this conversation with Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, seemingly every year at media days when we sit down. And there's a couple of factors. Number one, if you go from 8 to 9, you are guaranteeing half of your league another loss, right? You are guaranteeing another loss to half of your league. So without the playoff expansion, there was no shot. They were not going to 9 because you weren't going to cut off your nose to spite your face. The other key component was TV. So if the SEC expanded and went to 9 league games, they're adding league inventory for their TV partners. Well, the contract is structured such that if in the event of expansion or changes in the schedule, the two sides would come together in good faith and renegotiate the deal. Well, ESPN, which just agreed to a massive deal with the SEC, wasn't apparently, clearly, willing to renegotiate and pay more for more SEC inventory. So the league is saying, well, we're not just going to give you more league inventory without being compensated for it. Like, we're not going to facilitate another weekend of conference games without the financial benefit, which is prudent, and I get it. So, but I also think, guys, like, that's the inherent problem with college football. The fact that we don't just have a schedule where everybody plays 11 or 12 Power 5 or Power 4 games, and schedules are equitable, and you play it out, and you have a fair playoff structure that allows people to lose a game because you're giving the fans a great game in the regular season and still make it in. You know, teams are allowed to get better as the season goes along. Like, there's no rule against getting better from week 1 to week 12. So, like, I'm pumped that LSU and SC are playing. Like, I saw the story about Lincoln Riley, you know, saying, "Oh, he's trying to get out of the LSU game." Hell, I don't blame him. I mean, you're going into the Big Ten. You have a 9-game league schedule. You got LSU and Notre Dame. You got one breather of a game. Like, you're not playing an equitable schedule, and you're at a place that has tremendous expectation. And I mean, I get it. But think about how, like, backwards that is as football fans. We're sitting here in June and talking about a game in September because people are excited about it. And one of the coaches was saying, "I don't know if it's worth playing that game." Like, it's just the wrong way of. I'm not saying, like, he's wrong for thinking that way. He's got to protect his team, his program, their opportunity to play into a postseason. But in so doing, you'd be robbing fans of a great game that everybody's excited to see. So that's why I hope, man, we eventually. So you just wound me up and set me off on something that's like a huge pet peeve of mine. Like, this is a major passion point for me. It's like, we have got to get to a point where we stop seeing LSU against Nichols ever. Like, it is not the Power Four's job to fund the Group of Five. Nobody wants to see those games ever. You give me 11 or 12 games of power teams against each other that's fair and equitable across the country, where we can see great games across every weekend. It's such an abomination that I sit there and watch the SEC in the second to last week in November, and everybody's playing FCS schools. Like, what are we doing? So that's – I don't even know why I started on this. I don't know why y'all sent me down this path, but whatever. I started going, and that's my point. I don't know what my point was.
It's all part of a larger whole.
Play better games and stop with the crap games nobody wants to see.
It's my job, Matt, to bring these two back, usually to USC, as they wander off into the SEC or the Big Ten or whatever. So I'm going to pull them back a little bit because Gerardo has a question for you.
Yeah.
So he's basically saying, would you agree USC has a better offensive play caller and perhaps the better defensive coordinator staff? Do you feel LSU has better talent to offset and win the game?
Well, the play caller, that's an easy one. I mean, Lincoln Riley is one of the best in college football. And I don't even know that I would, that anybody could argue. But I think if you're saying Lincoln Riley against Joe Sloan, we're probably looking at it the wrong way. That sometimes when we look at, like, quarterback matchups, well, the quarterbacks aren't on the field at the same time. The thing that I would look at is, okay, Lincoln Riley against Blake Baker's defense, and then Joe Sloan against Lynn's defense, and how that matchup may go. I mean, I know Vegas has LSU about a touchdown favorite in the game, which, quite honestly, guys, is a little surprising to me because I don't know if y'all paid attention to this, but LSU hasn't won a season opener since 2019. In the COVID year, they lost to Mississippi State at home. In 21, they went out to the Rose Bowl and lost to UCLA. In the last 2 years, they lost to Florida State, once in New Orleans and once in Orlando. So, like, I kind of want to see LSU win one of these for a change. Like, there was a lot of people last year that started screaming, like, why not schedule a week 0 game? Clearly, your team needs a tune-up to get there. But, you know, as far as the DC and the staff, I can't speak to every member of USC staff. So again, like I would have to defer to you guys. But Brian Kelly had a major overhaul of his staff. And they brought in Bo Davis as the defensive line coach from Texas, who's pretty widely regarded as one of the best, if not the best, defensive line coach. Corey Raymond, who Brian Kelly did not retain when he was hired, has brought him back. Corey is the guy that sort of built the DBU thing for a decade here. They are, Blake Baker's coaching linebackers. They're undeniably a better staff defensively. I don't know how it matches up, staff member to staff member against USC, but it is a dramatically different reality this year on LSU's defensive staff than a year ago. Guys, I mean, the cornerbacks coach was a guy named Robert Steeples, whose first job in major college football was LSU's DB coach. That was just Brian Kelly made a couple of bad hires, when he got here, and he's rectifying that.
Yeah, I can't confirm or deny that the reason why I'm known as the resident not big fan of Brian Kelly is the fact those years at Notre Dame. But one thing is true: once he kind of figured out that staff after they hit bottom at Notre Dame, and he did that big switch up. It worked out really well for Notre Dame, so that might be the case for LSU as well.
The one of the really interesting things about LSU, guys, is this. I have this theory that LSU is one of 3 programs in America that have this very rare advantage, and that you're the only Power 5 or now Power 4 in a talent-rich state. And per capita, as odd as this sounds, Louisiana puts more players in Division I college football than anywhere, per capita.
In the NFL, correct?
In the NFL as well. So it's right there with Florida, with Texas, with California, with Georgia, with Ohio. So it's a super talent-rich state, but LSU is the only game in town. They're not going to get every player, but they're going to get a lot of them. I mean, and it's LSU, it's Georgia. With respect to Georgia Tech, they're just fishing in a different pond, and it's Ohio State. There's other states where, like Arkansas, for example. Arkansas is the only Power 5 in their state, but there's no talent in Arkansas. So, what Brian Kelly really had to figure out, guys, when he got here was, and I use this example, and I hate to use it because it sounds like I'm calling out a kid, and it's not his fault, but his first recruiting class, they recruited a kid named Jeremiah Hughes out of Gorman in Las Vegas. And Hughes was a 3-star cornerback. Guys, like, I could throw a rock from my home and hit 5 3-star cornerbacks in this state. It's just, there was no reason to get on a plane and fly to Vegas to recruit a 3-star cornerback. And what you've seen over the last 2 years of Brian Kelly is he shrunk that circle, man. Like, from that first year, I think, where maybe there were, 10 or 12 states represented, to like this last year was 4. It's like everybody from Louisiana, you got a couple of kids from Texas, a couple of kids from Georgia, maybe like one from Alabama, and that's it. And that's really all you got to do. And he's done that with his staff as well. Like Corey Raymond played at LSU. Frank Wilson is a guy from New Orleans who's on staff and is the recruiting coordinator now. Joe Sloan's coached in Louisiana for 10 years. Bo Davis played at LSU. So you got a lot of guys that know the culture as well. So like it took him a couple of years to really figure it out, but it feels like he's got it figured out. And guys, I mean, LSU's got the number 2 recruiting class in the country for 25. And if you go look at the 2026 rankings, like 3 of the top 5 players in the country are all within an hour of LSU's campus. And like, he's got a bumper crop these next 2 years that if he executes, LSU could really be in a position again to compete for a national championship. It took him a couple of years to really figure it out, but he's zeroed in. Now he's got to execute.
One more parallel between these 2 programs, Matt: special teams. Brian Kelly's special teams, so many struggles. You mentioned, LSU's inability to win openers. There was that infamous blunder against Florida State in the Superdome. And USC, Lincoln Riley doesn't have a special teams coordinator. He's tried to wing it. He's tried to do coach by committee. No, he's fallen splat on his face. What's the sense of Brian Kelly being able to fix or at least stabilize LSU's special teams so it's at least patched up and it can weather the storm this year?
Well, it's going to be one of those things that until I see it, it's going to be hard to believe that they've actually fixed it. So one of the coaches they brought in this year, Slade Nagel, he'll be the tight ends coach and he'll coach special teams again, but he's not a dedicated special teams coordinator. And Slade's got a long history coaching special teams. Back to when Brian Kelly was hired, guys, like if you went position by position on his staff, I think he upgraded everywhere except 2 spots. One is what we just talked about with Corey Raymond, where he brought in Robert Steeples, and the other was special teams. Greg McMahon was the special teams coordinator who was awesome. I mean, he spent a lifetime in the NFL coaching the Saints, and LSU was one of the best special teams programs in America under Greg McMahon when Ed Ogeron was the coach. And Kelly brought in Brian Polian and, again, kind of had him wing it a little bit. Special teams coordinator, recruiting coordinator, a little of this, a little of that, and it was a disaster. They just brought in a punter out of the portal. They have actually been consistent with Damian Ramos as their place kicker. If we end up seeing a close game on September the 1st, I'd feel comfortable with Ramos, lining up to kick. He's not the one that missed the kick 2 years ago against Florida State in the Dome, but the PAT. But Ramos is a guy I think they have a lot of confidence in. They brought in Xavion Thomas from Mississippi State out of the portal. He's a New Orleans kid who's a receiver. Is also probably going to return kicks and punts. I mean, you can tell there's a lot of trepidation. It's they can give me a lot of answers. They can tell me they like where they are, but it really is you got to see it to believe it type thing.
That resignation in your voice, we've had that at USC the past few years under Lincoln Riley.
Guys, 2 years ago when LSU opened up against Florida State in the Superdome, Malik Neighbors, who was just the 5th pick of the draft, Malik Neighbors, he muffed 2 punts in the Dome and then never returned another punt. And it's flabbergasting, as dynamic and electric and amazing as we all saw that guy is. The 5th pick of the draft. And, you couldn't work with him enough just to get him to catch the ball. and so instead, you're losing 40 yards of field position because you don't have guys that can field a punt. And so, man, it's been tough the last 2 years to watch special teams. Yes, it has.
We can relate.
Oh, Tim, you're on mute.
The Cotton Bowl kickoff. It's all coming back to me. These ideas about special teams losing field position. That was a big one as well.
Matt, we so much appreciate you being here. Matt Zemek, Tim, any other questions for Matt?
No, I just want to thank you, Matt, for coming on. Love picking your brain about it. Appreciate it, you giving our viewers, just a little breakdown of what's going on in Baton Rouge. So thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure, guys. Are y'all going to be in Vegas?
I will be.
Cool. Yeah, we'll be down there, man. We're going to be doing shows. Our whole lineup will be doing shows at the sports book at the MGM Grand. So they have a studio in there. So we'll be set up for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and probably Monday as well. So looking forward to getting there, man. Excited for a big opener, and hoping you all have a terrible, terrible Labor Day weekend.
Thanks again.
And folks, once again, if you can spell his name, and you don't even need to spell his name, we've done that for you. I finally figured it out after Matt was on 7 or 8 times. There it is on the banner right there. So there we go, Matt Moscona. Matt, you're amazing. We appreciate it. Have a great time. But of course, these guys would say not such a great time on Labor Day weekend in Vegas.
All right, guys. My pleasure. Y'all be good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Love the breakdown with Matt. And it's kind of fun to break down a football game and know that it's less than 3 months away.
Just want to say, Andouille, Andouille, Andouille.
Good sausage.
Well,
Mr. Moscona said, got to be able to spell Andouille. So there you go.
Our buddy Adam's dropping by. Adam, we so much appreciate you being here. It almost wouldn't be a show without you. LSU will beat us. It's ridiculous that we have such difficult schedules over the next few years, traveling across the country multiple times and hosting top 10 teams. Fulton, Colin should be ashamed.
Adam, buddy, first, thanks for the super chat. But second, Jen Cohen did not make this schedule. She wasn't here.
Yeah.
This game was scheduled years in advance. I mean, at least, if you want to blame someone, blame Mike Bone, okay? So like Jen Cohen, like she inherited this. And the Big Ten, Jen Cohen inherited that. Like she can't stop the train. And if you want to blame someone, it should be Carol Folt, a little bit also Mike Bone. Jen Cohen has nothing to do with this. Nothing she could have done to prevent it. So
we should not be blaming anybody.
Need to put that one to bed.
We should not be blaming anybody. This is who USC plays. It's our DNA. When earlier I kind of bit my tongue, we don't play FCS schools, and we've always got it. We played Notre Dame every year except for 3 years, a couple in World War II and COVID. We played Notre Dame every single year. We've always played the best. We played, like we're talking about LSU, we played them. There's not many teams USC hasn't played in true home and homes. So it's not time for us to start saying, oh, we're only USC. We can't play SEC teams. What are we thinking? We're crazy here. No, this is who USC was made to play. And it is only a one-score game. And I'll tell you what, that's because everyone in Las Vegas watched last year and doesn't think USC can tie its shoes on defense. I think Matt made a couple of points that give me a little bit of optimism that I didn't have before. I've been saying, I'm on record saying we're going to win this game. I just do. I really believe in this defense, and we know that the offense is going to be solid. When Matt told me that the secondary, there's not the same athletes they're used to having, I started thinking about our receiving core guys. Jacoby Lane, you ever heard of Zachariah Branch? There's going to be some feasting possibly going on. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Obviously it's LSU. They're going to have talent. When you have an LSU fan saying their secondary has had to drop down, that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's not, what we probably see in the past.
Just in terms of what Mr. Moscona said, I'm calling him Mr. Moscona because he's Matt, I'm Matt. So I just like differentiating the Matts here. The thing that Mr. Moscona said that concerns me is that he said LSU's strongest unit, offensive line. So like that reaffirms for me that the big position group matchup in this game is LSU's offensive line against USC's defensive line. And the Trojans don't have to win that matchup, but they need to draw. They need to be even. If USC can be even in that matchup, I give the Trojans a good chance. But obviously, if LSU's offensive line wins that matchup decisively, hard to see a path for the Trojans. And then we would need to put up 40. I briefly saw in the chat Gary from Dana Point saying he's getting more nervous. I think he heard what I heard as well. Oh, that LSU offensive line is really good. So like that's my overwhelming main front and center thought in terms of what USC really has to be able to hold up under the strain. Just play to a tie against LSU's offensive line.
Most of those guys were freshmen on that LSU offensive line when they lined up against Florida State in the Superdome a few years ago, and they have played a lot of football since then. Tim, if you notice, you didn't really need to bite your tongue because Matt Moscona was right there with you on the SEC and its ridiculous nature of scheduling all these FCS opponents the penultimate weekend of the season. So he's right there with you. Now, I will go to the tongue, Mark.
I bit my tongue to say, well, you can become a USC fan and you'll never see an FCS. That's where I bit my tongue. So I got you, though.
Now, see, I'm not going to go your end of the spectrum and predict a USC win. I'm also not going to be predicting an LSU win. I don't predict games 3 months in advance. I will say this, 7 points is too much. That doesn't mean it can't happen. That's not what I'm saying. So read me clearly, folks. That doesn't mean if I take USC as expect, unless my opinion changes drastically, I will run with USC +7. I will grab that and run with it. That doesn't mean the game can't be 30-24 with 3 minutes left and LSU kicks a field goal to ice the game 33-24 and put it on ice and they win by 9. That still doesn't make that a bad prediction. That just means things didn't work out. +7, USC will win that 80% of the time. That's too high. It's too much.
Yeah, I would, if I was setting the odds for this, and I know I'm not, living in a palatial gold mansion, on a bed of money, but if I was setting the odds, I'd say LSU -3.5. That's where I would put the number.
We are right there together, Matt. Perfect. 3.5. Exactly.
Yeah.
You're just making my point for me. I'm not guaranteeing a USC win, but if it's gonna be that close, which I think is gonna be close, I'm gonna go with the home team and say we're gonna pull out the win. That's where I'm at. I'm not saying USC is walking away with this, but there is a lot on both sides. There's so much unknown. Trying to set a line for this game, really, with all the new coordinators, all the 2 new starting quarterbacks. That I wouldn't want to have the job of setting a line for this game.
Yeah, I don't know why they're grabbing 7. That just seems too egregious for 2 teams that are this similar.
Well, I think there's a perception. I think there's a perception that the public is going to feed into, USC is not serious about defense. I think there's kind of the residue of that, but we at USC can see they're serious about defense. But nationally, that line, and the lines reflect what Vegas thinks the public's going to be buying on both sides. You'll get equal action on both sides of that line. I think Vegas is perceiving that the nation thinks USC is a lot weaker on defense than we here at Trojans Wire. No.
My bad. Yeah, again, USC, I think the rest of the country is waiting to see if USC can line up on defense, right? And be ready because that is the perception. That's what was happening last year. And like you guys said, with betting lines, it doesn't mean they're 6.5 better. It just means most of the country just throw money on that line because just what they've seen of USC of recent. So we had something up from Megan and I lost it. Let me pull it back up. Megan, thank you so much. Megan's been a member here for 6 months. Hey guys, fight on from down under. Megan's from Australia. Thank you, Megan. She's a huge Pete Carroll and Seahawk fan. I got to ask Megan what she's going to do now because now that Pete's not there anymore, we'll have to well, she'll just double down on her USC fans. So.
And seeing Megan with her membership there, Matt and I are going to rip off a roll of bonus segments coming up here very soon, including.
Got my knife and fork ready for those choice cuts.
They're coming. They're coming. So sign up now. We've got memberships available.
One of the choice cuts we have we're about to record, fairly soon, the month of June, is going to be one with a USC LSU thematic flavor. You're definitely going to enjoy it if you get a membership at the middle or top tier here at the Voice of College Football.
I know at the outset of the show we were into the recruiting conversation when Matt jumped on with us. Were there any other further points to go on that? Where were we?
I did. I had something to add about Hayden Lowe, but after about 55 minutes, it's long gone now. Just a strong pickup. I mean, if you look at, like we always talk about, it's not about what number they are, where that. You look at his film, you look at his tape, you can see this kid's an absolute animal. That defensive end room is just becoming first off, let's wait till December because it is recruiting. And then let's wait till after spring because, it's NIL. But more and more that defensive end position is starting to look really, really amazing at USC. And I mean, I'm excited what I'm seeing from Hayden Lowe.
I think the other point to talk about in terms of recruiting, and I stress, I'm not a recruiting guru or expert. I do not do deep dives into the recruiting part of the football industry. It hasn't been my specialty, and I don't make enough money at Trojans Wire to justify, losing myself in a recruiting rabbit hole. But I know enough about this sport to say that. One of the really interesting modern plot points in recruiting is, and a lot of people raise this in the chat, or why aren't we seeing a flood of commitments? And as though why aren't guys making these decisions right after their official visits to USC? as we've seen with Julian Lewis, like I'm not worried about him, defecting, flipping. But like he wants to see other parts of the country, meet other coaching staffs, visit other programs. Like there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing illegal about it. If these guys want to be wined and dined and courted, like that's part of the fun of this. It's just like a touring America. It's getting in touch with other coaches and their styles. There's no harm in it. They want to just see what everything is like. They want to get everything on this pigskin poo-poo platter, if you will. Sample all the hors d'oeuvres before they make their commitment. And so I don't see any kind of crisis. I don't see any cause for alarm. Like these guys are going to visit other places. Like that's how it works these days. I don't think it represents that they're hedging or are backtracking in terms of what they want. They just want to see the landscape, and like that is how the game goes today. And I think the main thing is, where are we at the end of June? Where are we at the beginning of July? All these kids are having their visits with all these different programs. We can just wait until the smoke settles. I don't think there's any cause for unique concern at this point.
I think that this is you were talking about, this is the new landscape, Matt. And I think more of there's money. I'm just going to flat out say it. And if you want, it's just like floating rumors, about coaches looking here and there. And what do you know? They got a raise again, and they get another raise. I think this is just another way to, I don't know. I have no idea what Julian Lewis is doing. But when I see things like this, I see this as just, okay, hey, I don't see a ring on my finger, figuratively, right? It's like we're still dating. Let's see where this thing goes. And I think get used to it, guys, because the days of having your 5-star quarterback commit in like January and then recruit your class for the whole year, those days might be over. But if they could on the flip side of that is if they could lock down Julian Lewis and he shuts it down, says, here's SC, as much as you can shut down recruitment these days, and says, look, this is it. I think you're going to see, I'm sure a lot of these receivers, because he has been behind the scenes, apparently. He's talked about the fact that he is recruiting receivers, that he's very close with a number of receivers. You saw over this big past weekend, the fact that you usually have your quarterback as the center, not just for on the offense, but on the defense. If you have a 5-star quarterback, kids want to win and they'll follow a leader. And usually your leader that the quarterback position becomes that guy. And if he's vocal and he begins building this class, which is already 3-4 in the nation, whatever you want to follow, whichever service you want to follow, it may be the thing that pushes USC, almost guarantees USC that top 5 spot. But there are no guarantees in recruiting anymore. USC's got to go out there and play. They're selling a lot of Coach Henderson and a lot of development. They're going to need to get out there and show it on the field. And I believe they're going to. And that also will do a long ways to solidifying this class.
Yes, speaking of Vegas, as we did with the LSU spread, 7.5. So less confidence out of Vegas, but
wow, 7.5. My goodness.
Yeah,
USC can lose by a touchdown, and you cash that ticket. Oh baby.
Well, I'm thinking win total too. 7.5 is what Vegas is saying.
And another one to smash.
Adam, Lincoln Riley was not the coach, and the defense. You got to keep everything in perspective. It changes. So, and he was, and by the way, if I remember correctly, Bryce Young was trying to recruit people and nobody wanted to come to USC. And so he's basically saying maybe he was rethinking what he was doing. And also, speaking of modern day, someone talked about the fact that Chuck McDonald, I believe he's talking Chuck McDonald from modern day, committed to Florida State, I guess. I did hear that as well. So you guys are not going to get everybody, and you're not going to get all the local guys. I think it's been really clear that USC is going national and can go national now. So we'll see where this all shakes out in December.
Our buddy Adam is telling me in the chat he can't wait for the next call-in show. He's got something to hit me up on. there, apparently. Adam, we will talk soon. We will talk soon. Can't wait to hear your next point. Absolutely. Yes. Keep chopping. The only thing I'll say about that is just at the point that you think you've got a sure thing, Vegas doesn't give away money. So just keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind. I think the same thing with Iowa. Now that has cashed out. They've been sitting at 7.5 and delivering 10-2 seasons for the last few. And I've said, punch that ticket again, punch it again. And this season, I'll say the same thing with Iowa. Punch that ticket. They're going to eclipse 7.5. So we shall see. All right, guys. Anything else we need to hit on? What's going on at Trojans Wire?
Pretty quiet. We're just waiting for more recruiting splashes. Like, that's our main thing. But Tim's had a number of stories today. One on the Braden Fisk transfer portal recruitment a few years ago when he transferred to Florida State. He said something about USC. So you want to read Tim's story there. And Tim has been talking about the overpay issue for premium defensive tackles. So we had a story on that. So, hey, after Tim's Murphy's Law meltdown May, he's a free man in June, and I couldn't be happier.
A lucrative meltdown, but yes, that's the key here. I was doing productive things in May to get me the big real dollars, but yes, I'm back and I'm ready to roll. So yeah,
tanned, rested, and ready.
It is Power Rankings Week at the Voice of College Football. We have released the ACC. Of course, the Big Ten is upcoming, as well as the other two conferences. So check out where we've got USC and our Power Rankings. Again, the ACC released. And we're doing a couple deep dives with Tony Altimore this week. Tony majors on the metrics involving the culture, the education, everything involved, the athletic programs, so forth. So two big themes this week with Tony. Wednesday night, we size up the ACC candidates for the Big Ten and the SEC. Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, and Virginia, and Miami. So we're going to look those over on Wednesday night. Friday night, Big Ten Live Show, Washington, UCLA, USC, Oregon, those four and how they stack up in the Big Ten. So those should be two really good shows with Tony coming up this week. All right. Looks like that's about going to do it. For Tim, for Matt, catch him on Trojans Wire, of course, and make it on back next Monday. But before that, you've got a date with these two on Friday at 7 Pacific time for the big call-in show. So we'll see you on Friday.